speaking exam. Let's jump into it. We'll talk about the scope of the exam, meaning what sort of material is included, the different parts. We'll take a look at sample tasks. I'll give some sample answers. And as usual, we'll discuss how this exam part is graded. So the scope of the exam, of course, is significantly bigger than step 2. Most of the differences come from past tense. Okay, so this is the biggest addition. Not only is it the regular endings with just ed, but also irregular forms. Okay, and I'll highlight where this will be in the exam. Of course, the topic list you see is also significantly expanded to include transport and weather. So this exam is much more involved than step 2. Another important difference that come here are the comparatives and superlatives. So something is faster, or it's the biggest, the best, the fastest. The students don't have to make questions here, but they need to be able to answer using this construction. Also, the word because is on the list. So this will be generally used in the story section. And adverbs of frequency and things like this. Okay? So these are the main differences that, of course, make the step 3 exam that much harder. With that in mind, let's take a look at what the exam consists of. Of course, part 1 is very similar to the step 2, some greetings and so on, and some simple topic for discussion. Now, in this part of the exam, the past tense could come up. Now, of course, it's not guaranteed that there will be a question for past tense, but this would be a good place for it. Okay? Part 2 is defining the differences between two pictures. Part 3 is storytelling using a sequence of pictures. And part 4, which many times is actually the most difficult for students, is the difference, the odd one out, I'm sorry, where there's a series of pictures and one doesn't belong to the group. So let's take a look at some samples. In the first one, the girl in the bed, the second one, the diver, regardless of what's in the picture, the examiner will always give an example. So for example, in the first picture, the girl is drying her hair with a pink towel, but in the second picture, the towel is blue. And then I will say, and now, could you give me some more examples? So if the student repeats my example, it's not a point lost per se, but it's also not a point gained. So they should listen carefully to what I'm saying or what the examiner is saying. Also, the student should mention 3 differences independently, so without my input. However, if they can only mention 2, I will point to something. For example, oh, but how about the fish? For example, if they haven't mentioned it, and say, okay, there's 1 fish here, another 2 fish on the picture. That's not a point lost. Okay, so there's no point deduction for not mentioning 3 independently. But if the student cannot mention the third one, even after I point out, then it's a point lost. Also, please keep in mind that this is not really the exam task for getting points for exam phrases. So if the student says in picture 1 and in picture 2, fine. There is 1 fish, here there are 2 fish, also completely okay. So it doesn't have to be a long memorized exam phrase like in the first picture I can see. I mean, that's great, that's fantastic if the student is doing that. But especially lower level students, there's no need to stress them out. They don't get any additional points for how great their exam phrase is. Let's look at the next task, story. Now this is generally quite hard for students, mainly because based on my experience, they can't start. So the examiner will start the story. For example, I will do the first bit. This story is about the windy day. Mom, Charlie, and Jack are going to the cinema. Can you continue the story, please? So the student shouldn't start from picture 1. in fact, the students need to continue from picture 2. If the student goes back and repeats question 1, picture 1, they get no points, especially if they repeat it differently than I did. If they repeat it differently, then it is lost point because it means that the person wasn't listening to the instructions. So the point is to continue from picture 2, and they could talk about anything in the picture. So this exam is not about evaluation of the students in psychology or logic or analyzing deeply what the story is about. They just have to mention simple things. And it could be that Charlie and Jack are outside the cinema. They are playing. Fine. Enough. There's no need to go much further. It's only step 3. However, something to remind students of, and this is great to get additional points, is first they should identify, are the people family members or not? So obviously, Charlie and Jack are not brothers, so they're friends, but most likely Charlie is the son. So make sure that vocabulary is used correctly. Is it someone's son, brother, sister? So they should differentiate between friends and family. To get extra points, they could talk about the clothing. That's a fantastic and easy way to get some points. Of course, what they are doing, great way to get points here is about feelings. So in picture 3, I could say the mom is angry because Charlie and Jack don't have the tickets. Great. So there are a lot of easy ways to get points, but the only thing that is actually required is the action. So Charlie and Jack are playing with leaves outside the cinema. The mom is asking about the movie tickets, and the last one, the movie tickets arrive by the wind. Enough. There's no reason to go further. I mentioned earlier in the scope that in step 3, there should be an evaluation of their knowledge of the past tense. Now, in this exam task, it is possible to do everything in present continuous or present simple, so a combination of the two. However, if a student chooses to do it in the past simple, that's great, because that's a good way to evaluate it. It's not required because it's, of course, with the past continuous, but it's preferred. So if the student can do it with past simple and past continuous, great. They have a chance to gain more points. If it's present simple and present continuous, that's perfectly okay. So there's no loss for no past answer. Let's look at the last task here. This is usually a bit tough, but again, I think it's the way we ask the students to do it. So let me show you a quick way to get full points. Okay. So as always, the examiner will mention the first part. You know, the book is the odd one out because it's not a fruit, okay? And then I'll say, okay, and then how about group 2? So again, the student should not repeat my example. That would be silly. And now, remember, on the exam, we're not evaluating logic, critical thinking, problem-solving skills. All they have to do is they have to make a grammatically correct sentence. So they could say that, for example, picture 1 is the odd one out because it's boring. Why not? It could be a fact about them. Why not? Or it could be picture number 4, shopping is the odd one out because I never do it. Why not? Perfectly okay example. Okay, as long as the grammar is correct, it's no problem. Because they have 5 seconds to come up with an answer. The point is to get a language answer, not a factual answer. So it would be easy to decrease the stress level for the students if we open up opportunities for them to answer. Okay. In number 3, of course, it could be, I don't know, the fish is the odd one out because it's the only one I have at home. Fine, sure. Or it could be, I I don't know, the elephant is the odd one out because it has the biggest ears. Don't forget, superlatives are on this level exam. Okay. Or it could be, I don't know, the bear is the odd one out because it's the only one that lives in Russia, for example. Of course, fish also live in Russia, but as a quick answer, we can have the students just deliver these answers. Okay. So now, of course, the grading is quite similar as the others. Okay. Of course, they don't lose points, again, for illogical answers. They don't lose points for making mistakes with, can you help me, to say, oh, help, or oh, those are all correct. Okay. So the same sort of grading scheme applies. The only thing that I would like to remind is that this exam has a lot of separate tasks, and it's quite easy to lose points without even noticing. And this is what I want to highlight in this last part. If the student doesn't say anything for longer than 5 seconds and doesn't ask for help, I'm afraid I have to move on to the next task. So if we're talking about, for example, the story task where they have to describe 3 to 4 pictures, if, for example, they can't start talking about, for example, the last picture, they might lose 25% of the points for that task. Or, for example, the odd one out, they have to talk about 3 sets of pictures. If they cannot do, for example, the middle one, they might lose 1/3 of the points. So you see, this is extremely easy to lose points. Whereas in step 2, it was much harder because the tasks didn't build on themselves, they were sort of independent. But here, their series did. You cannot skip anything, and that brings me to this next point, especially in the story task, or even the odd one out. Skipping part of the story or something, the last part, the middle part, or the odd one out, moving from one to the other without my request, means that they lose those points immediately. Okay. The other way to lose points, of course, is not knowing how to start, and this is especially difficult with the story. So make sure that we have the students listen to my beginning of the task, and then have them say something. Okay, even if it's this is Jack, or he is in picture 2. Okay, at least it's a start. At least now we can build from there. And of course, it's a great time to remind students that just ask for more time. Just say, I need more time. I'm thinking. Give me a second, please. Any of those phrases are fine. Just to stop the countdown of 5 seconds. Okay. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope you have found this useful. This was the step 3 discussion, and we'll of course take a look at step 4 and step 5 as well. Thank you very much. Goodbye.